All right, you are last.
Okay, we are live. Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 27th in the Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We are taking up H666, and I feel like I should like throw salt over my shoulder when I say that. But that's okay. It seems to be a relatively compact, smooth bill. And we're going to start with Representative Stephanie Jerome, Vice Chair of House of Commerce, and then go to an industry representative who will speak more to the bill, and then do a walkthrough of the bill. So, Representative Jerome.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Stephanie Zach Jerome. I represent the town of Brandon and I'm Vice Chair of the Commerce Committee. And I'm here to discuss H666. This on-rate number bill.
Yeah, I think we should like skip this stuff and like floor.
666, 13, all the,
Yeah.
that's not. Is
We
an
are
act,
not superstitious.
no,
Indians are there.
an act related to escrow deposit bonds. And so at the the most basic level, this bill provides another funding mechanism for large residential projects.
Yes.
At the very base. So let me just sort of review what this is all about. Under the current law, deposits for the purchase of units in common interest communities, sort of like large residential projects, must be held in escrow, meaning that a neutral third party will hold on to the deposits until the real estate transaction is completed. Under current law, developers may not finance construction costs for new housing communities using future resident deposits. So this bill proposes to permit housing developers to finance construction costs with these deposits if the developer secures the future residents' deposits with a surety bond. And a surety bond is a bond under which a neutral third party guarantees the developer's obligations to return the deposit. So H666, in H666, developers may withdraw residence deposits for construction purposes and only up to the amount of the surety bond, meaning that the future resident remains fully protected against loss of the deposit. So for example, if a developer wants to withdraw $50,000 in deposits for construction costs, the developer will be required to get a $50,000 surety bond. The idea is to maintain protections for the future resident while granting developers increased financing flexibility.
So a $50,000 surety bond would buy a lot more in assurances, right? But they would pay $50,000 to get.
Well, I don't think they pay $50,000 for the surety. It's like an insurance policy. You pay something and get this much back.
But you'd only get $50,000.
But so if the purchaser of of that condominium
Yeah,
or that housing unit, put a $50,000 deposit down,
okay,
the construction firm
okay.
would buy this essentially an insurance policy on that. So I can go, I can show you.
Okay,
So,
sorry, more like per person.
I actually, matter of fact, I will leave you with what is a surety bond,
Yeah.
Yay.
and so this came from DFR.
Right.
So I am happy to leave.
I figured I understood the concept, but $50,000 sounded so low. You mean
But
like
per
per
unit.
per unit?
Per unit.
Yeah, per unit.
Okay.
And it was just hypothetical, so.
Oh, yeah, type that, meaning,
Right.
it could be,
$100,000 a unit or something.
it could be 100, yeah, it could be more, like it could be whatever, but it's to,
Mhm.
it is an insurance policy that deposit,
Mhm.
in the case of something should go wrong with the construction project, that person gets the deposit back.
Yeah, and I understand this is what they do in Canada,
Yes.
and if we're talking about the same project, the
Yes.
developers.
I believe we have a
Yeah.
Canadian
Yeah.
out to testify.
Here, yeah.
So just sort of like sum up, so the strike all amendment, it does not alter the original concept of the bill, but instead the amendment proposes a few additional requirements to clarify and enhance these protections for the future resident. John's gonna be going through walk through the bill, so he can go into more details. But in some, it still makes it possible for a developer to use the deposits put on a residential unit by the future owner in the actual building of the project. So let me just clarify that. So if that person is gonna buy unit 2 or unit 1, then that deposit, that money that they're gonna use must be used in that unit or in that complex, so it's
Mhm.
just for that piece.
Mhm.
So it is used for the actual building projects instead of staying in an individual escrow account. This would allow construction firms to use deposits in building projects as long as they're 100% backed by a surety bond. So I will leave you this.
Okay, thank you.
So you have that, and if you'd like to know who we heard, are you interested in knowing who we heard from when we were discussing?
Any highlights? Otherwise, we'll, like people you think we should hear from if we need to go down any rabbit holes. Otherwise, Magali can.
We had, so I guess sort of just, DFR spoke to us, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, Consumer Assistance Program, Vermont Bankers Association. We had a person, insurance executive come in, explain surety bonds to us.
Did anyone oppose this by that?
No.
Senator Clarkson.
So, Stephanie, you buy a speculative unit in a project that you think is going ahead. Why would you put down a lot of money to save that unit and then have to pay to buy an surety
So
bond?
you don't pay the surety bond, it's the construction,
Okay.
it is the owner of the construction project.
They use your deposit,
The developer.
right?
The
So
developer
just-
pays for the surety bond,
Yeah.
so that it liberates the escrow money to help finance the construction.
It guarantees that 100% of that money will go back to it goes,
Well,
100% goes back to the, future resident.
If
Okay,
they don't deliver, if they don't deliver the condo, then your deposit is insured.
I knew about real estate, right? So yeah, you know, yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
And finance, so.
The only question,
I
Okay,
had this bill, being worked on for the Senate, and then he got it through in the House, sorry.
okay.
Senator Brock.
I've done my background.
You know this, you know all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, you're the in-house expert.
One question I have is maybe another witness would be better to answer is, A, defining default, B, looking at the timeline, between default and money being returned, and question of litigation as to whether the construction company says, well, I did it, the buyer says it didn't, you have a dispute, and what happens then, and has there been any history of that, of how those are resolved in terms of.
Yeah, I John might,
Yeah.
knows a lot more about this than I,
Right.
but I
Those
don't
are the
recall that being,
Yeah.
we had, the Bankers Association, the Real Estate Association, were all 100% in
It
favor,
makes sense.
in favor of this bill.
Yeah.
And I think the default is, that's why you have the surety bond.
Yep.
So the surety bond covers all risk.
And presumably the default event is defined with sufficient specificity that it happened or it didn't happen, as opposed to getting into it, well, it did, it didn't, it didn't, and for practice.
Right,
I'm in the shower, I expect it, therefore, he didn't deliver what I thought I was getting.
Right. And I don't think default is in the actual changed language, so that must be sort of embedded in the existing statute of.
it would be outside of the scope of the escrow deposit bonds and would relate to the relationship between the purchaser under whatever agreement they have, like the purchase of that unit is what would govern the default. And basically, and I can talk about this, but the bond would ensure that the default terms that are captured in that purchase or reservation agreement would be the same terms as what's contained in the bond agreement, so that if there's a default under the purchase agreement, that's what's picked up by the bond, but the bond itself doesn't have to talk about the defaults themselves. That's dealt with separately. And litigation on that front would be dealt with separately within the context of the purchaser being required to do their own. So you could have, I'll hold up until I get up, but that's the idea, that it would be.
Yeah, and I understand, and that, again, just as a question in the back of my mind, is who's going to define the purchase agreement? And presumably the developer is the one who's going to draw the agreement. The buyer is going to be the one to sign it, whether or not his or her attorney is sufficiently attuned to the fact that is there something in the purchase agreement that will allow the developer to weasel out by claiming, well, I did A, B, and C, but I didn't do D, E, D, but that kind of, and so on with purchasers, et cetera. That to me is key, for how the purchase agreement is structured.
Sure.
so can we just clarify, the problem we're solving is how to liberate all that deposit money so that the developer can use it during the course of
In a
construction.
safe, secure
And-
way.
And
for
yes,
the
and it can be a
deposit for-
significant amount of money.
Yeah, that's a great idea, but the concern I have is the purchaser going to be adequately protected to allow a dishonest developer to weasel out of it by saying I didn't, and then have protracted litigation, and the purchaser doesn't have his money out. That's my concern.
Right.
I see
That's what the
Senator
brokers-
Harrison.
Yes, thank you. And I think this is a great idea. And I think this addresses one of the problems we have with housing, which is that our financing mechanisms aren't flexible enough.
Right.
So just a couple of questions, or did you talk about the developer showing the forms or having the bond be held, not legally held, but submitted to some government, either the town or the state, because that's what we would do in another state when we had situations like this, was just so that there's a guarantee that a public entity has actually seen the bond. I think we might want to talk about that.
Well, I don't know if like Killington would feel qualified to,
Well,
you know.
I mean, you don't have
Well,
to.
that's up to DFR.
Yeah, okay.
DFR.
Yeah, so that would be a
Yeah.
DFR.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so we'll have DFR in.
And
Just so, I mean,
Yeah. And then, well, it's just on a different, it looks like this is intended to be, possibly a choice of the buyer, whether or not their deposit gets used, because there's a, option. It looks as if there's. an
yeah,
option. Is that what
I believe that's
you wanted?
that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
all right, that's a helpful distinction. They could say, I don't feel comfortable.
Right, right. And if I were a developer, I would give them a discount for letting
Yeah.
me use their money.
There you go.
So, give them an
Because it
incentive.
allows, if they don't have to borrow the money, that keeps down their costs.
Right,
Right,
sure.
because they're
Right.
gonna be paying to buy
Right,
it.
so we might wanna suggest or put in somewhere specific language that would be in the purchase agreement, just so that they're very clear.
Just recognizing though that every time you do something like that, one, to get government involved, that's going to slow the process down, and our object is to speed it up. So we've got to balance, I think, what we do, does it make sense and is it protection, or is it just one more impediment that discourages?
So Senator
are you
Brock,
saying
you're
about the
looking for
bonds?
some kind of
Yeah.
additional private
I'm
assurity?
not sure. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to get
okay.
the answers to the
Yeah,
questions
okay,
that I asked
okay.
first, and then
So
perhaps. we
Is
can look at
DFR,
private
do you think?
solutions
Yeah.
that we need. DFR.
Here, I'm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
DFR,
but
okay.
actually bonds are now a new
Yeah, yeah.
instrument. I mean,
yeah,
DFR, I'm
right.
sure has lots of experience
So
and can tell us
Okay.
what their costs.
So just reiterate, the banking association approved this, the
Mhm.
realtors association approved this, the DFR, we did not have any.
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like
Good.
the insurance industry has safeguards with a surety bond
Mhm.
to oversee some of these issues, I think that you're.
Did you hear if other states have started to allow this?
Well, Canada does this. There were a couple states that do it in some sort of a. Not, goodness. Do you remember?
So I chime in,
Yeah,
we
please.
drafted this on the basis of language from Washington. The
Washington.
reason that we did that is that this is modifying a uniform act. And
Mhm.
Washington had that uniform act in place.
Oh,
It was useful to have, like, we made slight tweaks to it, but largely
okay.
same concept as what Washington did. This is not universally done across the country, but we're certainly not the first state.
So would it, is it relevant to the Uniform Commercial Code?
This is, sorry, not Uniform Commercial Code, this is Uniform Common Interest Community Act or something.
Okay.
It's another kind of
And
uniform.
when did that uniform draft for that?
There is a UCC on condos.
Mm.
Which is,
Yeah, this is your uniform related to condos.
Yeah,
okay.
Those
I
kinds
had
of
to
developments, that's
present-
the common interest communities.
Okay.
But it's exciting. Sounds good.
It's,
Yeah,
it's a.
At the very, like I said,
concept.
at the very basic, it's
Yeah.
another
Yes.
mechanism for larger projects and keeps the money sort of,
Mm.
within the building project.
And we're about to hear from Michael about all the successes in
Yes,
town.
thanks so much.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you.
for reading.
Yeah,
I in real estate, if it isn't in writing, does not exist.
Right. Which is the
Who
larger
sponsored this bill?
body of law that we.
both me and, the, Rutland County delegation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking to do it in the Senate, and the Rutland delegation asked if they could do it.
Okay.
Because it's in their district.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, welcome.
Have a great,
Thank
we'll see you later.
for being with us. And you have the floor. It
great.
sounded like you were writing down some of the questions you were asking. Bill.
Excellent, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right.
Yes, we can hear you. We see.
Good, okay. Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Michael Snade. I am the president of the Resort Residential Division at Great Gulf. Great Gulf is a Toronto-based.
A little bit.
It's all the way.
If there's a way for you to turn your.
Yeah.
up.
If you could
Just
turn
a
your
little.
volume up, that would help, because our volume's turned up all the way and you're not quite.
Oh, okay, let me see if there's something here I can do. Is
Just
that
your
better?
volume.
How is that? Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, good. I'll start over. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Michael Snade. I am president of the Resort Residential Division of Great Gulf, which is a Toronto-based real estate development firm. I'm also president of Great Gulf Killington, the development company that will be creating the village at Killington. Great Gulf is a diversified North American development company that has built over 135,000 homes over the past 50 years in North America. Our Ashton Woods sister company is the largest privately held home builder in the United States and was named Builder of the Year in 2023 by Builder Magazine. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to this Senate committee. Before I give my presentation, I would like to mention how grateful I am to the work to date by the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. I'm also grateful to Representative Stephanie Jerome, who you just heard from, the reporter of the bill, our local representative Jim Harrison, and to the bipartisan sponsors of the bill. In May of last year, Great Gulf acquired all of the lands at the base of Killington that had a long history of delayed promises, of foreclosure, and prolonged regulatory planning. After extensive due diligence, we determined that Killington was a premier Eastern ski resort that could be transformed from a winter primary destination into a four-season destination, attracting people from all over the world, building off its reputation, off its World Cup successes, and its tremendous ski assets and mountain assets. We found that the operator and owner, Powder, was an excellent team with a top-notch local group. Our partnership with this group will continue both to improve the resort and realize the village's development potential. We worked collaboratively with the town of Killington. And
Something.
yes.
Maybe it's the distance from the microphone, but just now it went quieter.
Oh dear.
That's better.
You have to put up with my big head then. Okay. And I will increase the volume. How's that? Is that better?
I don't know if it's somehow going in and out.
Oh dear. I'll try and speak as clearly and as possible.
Right there, that was good.
Okay. I'll repeat the last little section. After extensive due diligence, we determined that Killington was a premier Eastern ski resort that could be transformed from being a primarily winter operation into being a four-season destination, attracting people from all over the world, building off its mountain assets, building off its World Cup successes, and its worldwide reputation. We found that Powder was an excellent resort owner operator with a top-notch local management team. And our partnership approach with this team will continue to both improve the resort and realize the village development potential. We worked collaboratively with the town of Killington and the state's Vermont Economic Progress Council to create Killington Forward. It's a $53 million investment in road and water infrastructure through approximately $19 million in grants and $34 million of tax increment financing. Killington Forward will provide PFAS-free water to the existing community and the new village. Plus, it will improve Killington Road, both at a difficult Route 4 intersection and to enable and create the new village. Great Gulf and the resort's management announced in October that we would donate $750,000 to assist with the development of 300 workforce housing units on a 70-acre parcel on Killington Road that was acquired by the town of Killington last year. Great Gulf inherited an existing Act 250 master plan approval that allows for the construction of up to 2,300 residential units from the base of Killington to the K1 Lodge. Act 250 also fully approved the first phase, which includes 193 condominium units, 32,000 square feet of retail, a 77,000 square foot replacement ski lodge, and a 32-lot single-family home community adjacent to the village. While we could have started construction immediately by applying for a building permit, we wanted to take what was a good plan and make it excellent. We wanted a village that was pedestrian friendly, that removed cars from the streets, that was completely walkable, that celebrated the existing pond and the Vermont landscape, a place where cars are only underground, where people would want to live and visit. So we are making a series of changes to the project that we believe will enhance its long-term value and attractiveness. The project will create more than 1,200 jobs during construction and almost 1,500 jobs, permanent jobs, in operations once complete. These jobs and the economic development will be generational. The project has a 25-year build timeline, and so the construction jobs will last for the duration of the project. Skilled construction trades, supporting industries like trucking, landscaping, hospitality, healthcare, and legislation. The legislative language that you are considering today would allow us to use deposits for the condominiums to begin construction on an incremental basis while protecting the buyers with full bonding should anything go wrong. We support the language in the bill and strongly believe that it protects buyers while allowing us to begin construction earlier. This in turn helps us create those jobs I talked about and economic activity as soon as possible. The bill's language is routine in several other states like Washington, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. We also have a similar system here in Ontario, Canada. The bill protects purchaser deposits through bonding while allowing home builders to use the deposits for construction costs. This reduces the amount of either home builder equity investment required or construction financing required. Either way, interest costs will be reduced and more projects across the state will become viable and affordable. For example, with 20% deposits and 20% home builder equity, without this legislation, the home builder would need to raise construction financing at 80% of costs, which is very unlikely to happen. With this legislation, the construction financing would only need to be 60% of costs, a level acceptable to most banks. The homeowner deposit bonding will be on top of completion bonds already required by most construction lenders. As a result, the interests of the purchasers and the construction lenders will be aligned. In the end, The deposit legislation will help both our Killington project and home building across the state. I look forward to working with you on this, and I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That answered a lot of the questions that I had. I'm really grateful to hear about the workforce housing. And I was with some of our Canadian housing partners in Connecticut over the weekend and learned that Ontario grew by 2,000 people a day last year. So Ontario really knows what it's doing when it comes to infrastructure.
Well, Toronto in particular.
Yes,
Incredible what's
yes, sorry,
happening in Toronto.
Toronto particularly.
They have a very low corporate income tax.
Yes,
Many Vermont car makers, or US car makers are located just over the Niagara.
right. But before I go to questions, I just want to say it's such a different funding mechanism we were looking at. It's such a different story, but I feel taken in, like many were taken in by the J. Peak vision, you know, a decade or so ago now. And I don't want to in any way insinuate this is similar, but I do share Senator Brock's just general concerns that we make sure we protect Vermonters and protect ourselves from getting too excited too early. You obviously seem incredibly reputable, and including Ashton Woods and, you know, everything that you're doing. But we have had a very negative experience that that four of us were here for, and, you know, we just need to be as thoughtful as possible. DFR, I think, will help us be thoughtful. I was thinking about having the treasurer in to talk about his time at DFR during the EB5 scandal and just share what's changed from then. So this has nothing to do with you, Mr. Sneed, but I hope you understand we should kind of frame up the due diligence around this, because it's been a while since we've had a very exciting ski resort project to take shape to make it year round, and now we still have a hole in the ground in Newport, Vermont. Senator Clarkson.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Michael. This was great. We didn't introduce ourselves, but
Oh, yeah.
I'm Allison Clarkson. I'm born and raised in Buffalo, New York, and with Tessa Clarkson, lots of Canadian family. And I know Toronto intimately. I am incredible, you know, it's astonishing what's happened in Toronto in the last little bit, in the last 30 years. I guess my question is, how long has this been in place for Toronto developers to take advantage of? And so how long has it taken, and what have been the challenge, you know, what has been the sailing? How's it worked? And how many companies have successfully used it, and how many companies have there been some problems with?
It's been in place for as long as I can remember, and I've been working in this industry since the early 1980s. I can get the exact date of when the Ontario New Home Warranty Program was put in place, but it's as long as I can remember.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, and I am not aware of a single case where purchasers of projects that failed were not able to get their deposits back. And again, I can do a little more research for you on that, but I'm not aware of a single case.
I think the other issue that was very prominent in our scandal of 10 years ago with many local workers and companies going unpaid for, I think some of them were made whole in the end, but just, you know, even if the investors get their money back, just making sure that the local economy is made whole if anything doesn't come to fruition.
Yes, the relationship between the home builder or the developer, the purchaser, the construction company, and the financing company, the construction financing company, is a well-established group with well-established contractual relationships. What happened in EB5 was you had foreign investors who really, there was no precedence for this kind of investment. The investment took place as equity, and it didn't have the kind of relationships and policing that construction lending does. So on construction lending, the lender makes sure that all of the trades are paid. And the lender makes sure that there are no liens on the job before they lend the next tranche. And so that relationship between the purchasers, the developer, and the lenders is one that's well established and well worked out.
Great. Yes, because I think I want to get excited, but I don't want to get too excited, without hearing things like that.
I certainly understand it, and there is a difference between the EB5 program in that we had investors from all over the world provide capital into this program that did not have the kind of oversight that it needed, and that is completely different than the kind of oversight that we have, contractual oversight with our construction lenders on these kinds of projects.
Absolutely. The last thing I want to flag is for Gwen, who's in the room to help us follow in the House, is I understood there's something that particularly the Rutland delegation was concerned about moving through maybe 820 and H829 that would disallow you from receiving the benefits of both a TIF and a designated area. And I think I would understand the concern a lot more as it relates to this project. I didn't know so much TIF, TIF incentive might go into this project. And I was already worried about this piece that might be traveling through Ways and Means.
That would be interesting to find out about, because we just got a big TIF. So I represent the district right next to you, and Killington just got a big TIF. That is one of the reasons this project can go forward, is that we got the TIF to do the water and
I think even in our housing bill, there was something in the governor's proposal that didn't allow you to take advantage of any blighted property tax freeze if you were also in a TIF. So we should explore both of those to see if that's hampering this, because the Rutland delegation has been quite active in trying to understand.
We just did this Killington TIF.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to point out is that while we worked with the town and we executed a development agreement regarding the TIF, the funding of the TIF, the construction under the TIF is all by the town without our involvement.
Yes, and I would like to get Killington in too. So our committee assistant's going to work on talking to Killington, and we'll figure this out. I just want to flag that because I now understand better why the Rutland delegation has been watching TIFs extremely carefully, not just for down.
We've been watching. So we are the school that would benefit with your workforce development housing and any full-time people who came to, because I live in Woodstock, and the Woodstock Union High School is the one with the $99 million bond question.
Right.
And part of it is dependent on getting those additional workers in Killington.
Yeah.
So you said it was 350 workforce housing units. How many housing units for the purchasers? How many final housing units are you looking at?
So the total PUD and the master plan approval for the Killington Village is for 2,300 residential units.
And they range
approximately 600 of those will be located within what we call the village, and then the remainder will be between the village area and the K1 ski lodge.
Got it. Okay, great. Thanks.
And the 300 roughly, because they're still working out their plans on the 70 acres that the town acquired, the roughly 300 units for workforce housing, and they're located much closer to Route 4 along Killington Road.
Yeah. Well, it's better than an hour commute.
Senators.
That's true.
Right, this is very exciting. So the 2,300 units, that's the complete project.
That's the
what we-
complete project, yes, and that will take us about 25 years to build out.
Yeah.
We expect around 100 units per year. And so that's why I say that the construction jobs and the associated jobs, you know, the spin-off jobs, are generational. Somebody that is an electrician working could work at our project for their entire generation.
Right, which would be great. As you know, we have a deficit in those jobs, but then if you have a long-term position, it would be easier to fill that position. Right, and then back to the workforce units, so I'm not as familiar with this area as other folks, so when you say on Route 4, how far is that from the jobs?
It's actually, if you know where the resort already has its workforce housing, it is as you're heading down Killington Road, heading north on Killington Road towards Route 4, it's the last intersection that takes you to the right. Before you hit Route 4.
Perhaps after this, if you're okay with it, Lynn and others can share some renderings and maps to show us
And if it's
a
going
visual of what's proposed. And
Right.
we'll go down there at some point.
and if it's going to be car-free, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
It's-
not the whole thing. Just I think the
Just
car-free part is just the village up at the top.
Okay, so it
It
probably
is.
would be transportation for the workforce.
Right. That's still very exciting because those ski areas just look like one big gridlocked parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
Usually, so I think it's an exciting vision, especially in the context of all of the different weather we've been having.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's wonderful that an existing company who has done this
Mhm.
is interested in doing it.
Yeah.
And partnering
And that-
and with
What's
companies.
one of the other large United States ski areas in your portfolio?
This is a Great Gulf's first ski area in the United States, but
Wow.
previously I was at a company called Replay, and Replay was the redo, let's call it, of Intrawest. And Intrawest was the largest ski area development company in the world.
Okay.
And they did Stratton, for example, and they had a number of resorts, including Mammoth, in the West.
Mhm.
And we did projects when I was at Replay. We did projects at Park City. We had projects in California. I was also president of a company called Skyline, and Skyline owned two ski resorts. One ski resort was in Ontario called Horseshoe, and we developed around 600 units at Horseshoe during my tenure. There were around 1,500 units in the total development. And I think that's grown to over 2,000 today. And then we also own Deerhurst Resort. And when the G8 came to Canada, they stayed at our resort, at Deerhurst Resort. And we both operated the resort and we expanded the residential at the base of it with probably around 1,000 units. And Deerhurst Resort was right adjacent to a local ski hill. You'd laugh if you saw the size of our hills, but you'd be impressed with the number of skiers they put through. So a big day at Killington is over 10,000 skier visits. We would see 10,000 skier visits at our resort in Ontario.
And bring up a good additional point, which is right now in Vermont, we don't have a lot of facilities that can host a world-class, convening of any kind. So that is a
Yes.
value, in addition to outdoor recreation, we just have a need for meeting space, a convening space that meets the needs of global companies. Yes.
Yes, and as you may know, the World Cup went from Killington this past year to Tremblant. Tremblant was an Intrawest project. And I think the World Cup participants routinely cite Killington and Tremblant as their favorite destinations on the whole world tour. So that's tremendous for the marketing of skiing in the East.
Absolutely. Michael, I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of our challenges in Vermont is the number of seasonal residents that we have that actually fill a lot of housing that could be owned by full-time residents, paying income tax, having children in our school system. So I guess one of my concerns about this is it's 2,300 units, great that we have 350 workforce housing units. How many of the 2,300 are you expecting to be full-time residents? Because there'll be almost no life in your village if you don't have a blend of full-time people and part-time people.
Yes, and that's a very good question, and one that we have experience with. Interwest also developed Blue Mountain Village, and when I was at Skyline, I acquired the village. So we were the operator of the village and all the remaining development lands around the village. We were surprised at the number of full-time residents that came and acquired real estate in our development. And the reason is times are changing. People realize that they can work from home, they can remote work. Just the same way I'm making my presentation to you today, people realize that they don't have to be in Manhattan or downtown Boston, that they can spend most of their time in their home and be able to go into the office on sporadic trips. What that means is that more people can call their permanent home or their what was in the past, their temporary home, their permanent home. And this is definitely the trend that we saw at Blue Mountain. We also saw something very interesting. Adjacent to Blue Mountain was a town called Collingwood. Collingwood is very similar, or was very similar to Rutland. Whereas Rutland lost its marble industry in the 1980s, 1990s, Collingwood lost its shipbuilding industry. And Collingwood was a shadow of its former self. But today, with the amount of permanent residents that are deciding to locate in the Blue Mountain area and in the Collingwood area, Collingwood has had a resurgence. And it's basically an economic miracle in Ontario today. And so I think that was a trend, a technological trend, but I think that technological trend was accelerated by COVID-19. People were required to stay at home and realized that they could operate just as effectively in offsite locations. And so I think we will see a large proportion of our units and our townhomes and our single family homes will be by permanent residents.
Great. Okay, we should walk through the bill to make sure we understand it, but this has been extremely helpful. Michael, thank you so much. And you're welcome to sign off or leave it on as you wish, and we'll just be walking through the bill for the next half hour.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them in another session with the committee. Or if you'd like any information, please feel free to send me or Gwen an email or a text, and I'd be happy to provide them.
Great. I think those renderings will be helpful for people, to see the scale of the project and the transportation effects. But other than that, I think we'll just be in touch because we need to.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
John.
Good morning, everyone. John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel, just pulling up my screen sharing so you guys can see.
So this is short a bill is.
Quite short. And I think it'll be clear to you guys, but obviously the scope of this conversation was a bit broader, dealing with particular projects and history. I will just be talking about what this bill attempts to accomplish, which is in part furthering that project, but maybe more limited than the kinds of protections you're concerned about broadly related to development, which I think are beyond the scope of this bill. But
In preparation, have you read anything about our AB5 challenge?
Nope.
Yeah. Would understand our concerns.
no, that was what I was gathering from.
But that was,
It's a
it
different
was,
area.
it was a federal project with
Yeah.
federal green cards and federal, and we were very late getting in.
Yeah.
to-
Right. At the same time, I had, in some ways, wanted to have the treasurer talk about DFR's changed practices after that, so that there was more oversight, because I think many in state government were taken in by a very
Yeah.
exciting sounding project, and some oversight was lost. So I think to assure our colleagues and Vermonters that this will be different, because it is a very large investment, and promising a lot of jobs. I think it's incumbent upon this committee to carry the knowledge from what happened then forward, now that it's been a decade.
Right.
So with that, I will jump in, H666, which the only bill number that I really wanted, and I got it, so I'm pretty happy. An act relating to escrow deposit bonds, just to set up, and I think you'll recall from Representative Jerome's statements, under existing law, and this is in your Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act. So this is an act that applies across a number of states and is relating to common interest communities, which are things like condos, HOAs, the like. Basically communities where someone, through their ownership of a particular unit, also owes certain fees or taxes on services or improvements related to common parts of those facilities or other units. So that's the idea behind what we're talking about here. Under existing law, when a future resident or purchaser of a unit puts down a deposit on that unit to protect that purchaser, what current law says is that it has to be held in escrow and it will only be returned in particular circumstances. So you can see this in subsection A. Any deposit, and I'm going to skip the new language, I'm just going to talk about what's in existing law. Any deposit made in connection with purchase or reservation of a unit from a person required to deliver a public offering statement pursuant to subsection 4102C. And just to call out what that is, that's your declarant or dealer. Those are the people who are sending out that unit. That's your person who's releasing a unit to the public, basically. So any deposit made in connection with that purchase or reservation shall be placed in escrow and held either in this state or in the state where the unit is located in an account designated solely for that purpose. And then you have a set of entities that can be managing this: a licensed real estate broker, an attorney licensed in that state, or a banking institution, accounts of which are insured by an agency or instrumentality of the government until the deposit is. And here's your set of conditions under which that deposit would be returned, delivered to the declarant at closing, the declarant being the person offering the unit, that's not the purchaser. So that's, it will be held in escrow until closing, and at that point, the declarant can then receive it or deliver to the declarant after the purchaser's default under a contract to purchase. And that default would be spelled out in the terms of that contract to purchase. It would be unrelated to this particular statute. Or,
Similar to a deposit in a real estate transaction.
and that's exactly what this is. This is what, I'm sure you've encountered this if you've dealt with these kinds of communities. This is exactly what's currently in place, or it will be refunded to the purchaser in certain conditions. So that is already what the law says. What the new language is meant to do is to carve out one particular exception. And so we can jump, that's what you see as this first line of except as provided in subsection B. We're carving out one particular piece with the purpose of financing construction costs with future resident deposits. That's the idea behind it. So how does it do this? If the agreement, there have to be a set of conditions in place for this even to be available. So if the agreement for purchase or reservation of a unit provides the deposit funds may be used for construction costs, so you actually have to spell that out in that purchase or reservation of the unit, meaning that there is notice to the purchaser that that's what's going to be happening. There's a question earlier related to if they have to consent to it. This is the mechanism for that. It will have to be included in that agreement. So if that agreement provides that they may be used for construction costs, the declarant, again, the person offering that unit, obtains and maintains a surety bond as required by this subsection. And we can spell out the technicalities in subdivision 2. And the declarant discloses the identity of the issuer of the surety bond to the purchaser, meaning that this is, the contract has to provide notice that this is happening and tell them who that issuer is. So if they're concerned about whether that's a regulated entity, which it will be, but if they're concerned about knowing who that surety bond issuer is, they are being apprised of that situation. So if those conditions are met, disclosure of use for construction cost, obtaining a surety bond and disclosing the identity of the issuer, the declarant can withdraw escrow funds for purposes of construction. So they're limited as to what they can use those funds for. The funds shall only be used for actual building and construction costs of the project in which the unit is located. So they can't go fund some other project that they run. It's only for that project. Now, it doesn't have to be confined to that person's unit. It just has to be the project of which that unit is part. You can imagine that they might be building out the whole thing and they don't need the funds for this.
They said 100 units a year.
So that's the set of conditions that are in place. So what actually has to happen under subdivision 2, the bond shall be issued by a surety authorized to do business in the state of Vermont in favor of the purchaser, meaning that it will be paid out to the purchaser in an amount adequate to cover the amount of the deposit to be withdrawn. So it's meant to be 100% coverage of any withdrawn funds. The declarant shall not withdraw more than the face amount of the bond, meaning that they can't get a $50,000 bond and then withdraw $100,000. They can only withdraw the amount of that bond. So it's meant to be 100% protection for the purchaser. The bond shall be payable to the purchaser if the purchaser obtains, and they can obtain one of two things: a determination by the issuer of the surety bond that a claim is payable to the purchaser under the terms of the bond. So that's not through a judicial process. That's saying this surety bond issuer can look to the bond and say, are these conditions met? And they can make a determination that the claim should be paid out to that purchaser. This was actually language that was added in and new, was not part of the initial drafting. And this was added because we were told that from folks in the industry that this is the typical process, is that the surety issuer will make that determination. So that's one thing that can lead to the bond being paid out to the purchaser. The other is, and I should say too, that the terms of that bond have to be consistent with the terms of the agreement for purchase or reservation. So this is meant to prevent any deceit. Basically, you could theoretically set up a surety bond that has completely different conditions from what are in the purchase agreement, which has been this already existing negotiated process. And maybe they try to somehow finagle that process to ensure that if you defaulted under the surety bond, it's not meeting the same conditions as what are in that purchase or reservation agreement. This phrase, which shall be consistent with the terms of the agreement for purchase or reservation, is meant to ensure that you're getting the same thing that you looked at when you were talking about the purchase or reservation agreement.
Okay.
Another possibility for obtaining that bond is if you receive a final judgment against the declarant. So again, the person offering that unit, requiring the declarant to return the deposit pursuant to the agreement for purchase or reservation. So that's like what you will see in existing law, in the sense that if someone's challenging whether or not they should receive funds, or a declarant hasn't followed through on their promises, a purchaser is going to have to go through a process to adjudicate that dispute. This is similar to that. It's saying you could receive a judicial determination against the declarant requiring return of that deposit, but it's not the only avenue that you have. The purchaser can also go to the surety bond issuer, and they can make the claim payable based on the terms of the bond. The bond may either be in the form of an individual bond for each deposit accepted by the declarant, or in the form of a blanket bond assuring the return of all deposits received by the declarant. So this last line is meant to be an administrative piece. It might be frustrating or inefficient for the declarant or developer to have to go out for each particular deposit and get a separate surety bond. If they can basically aggregate these as a whole, each deposit, and then take out a large bond that allows them to use all of those, it would be administratively simpler for them. So that's what that last line is meant to do. And then effective date to take effect on passage. So in concept, I think this is actually, the concept is quite simple, and there are several provisions that are in here that are meant to protect the purchaser to the extent that they would already be purchased. They would already be protected if you didn't have this bill. So just again, to compare what the consumer protections are, we're comparing having this held as escrow or having this being protected by a surety. That's the difference in consumer protection between the two. Is this held by a neutral third party that can't get those funds back except under one of those three conditions, or is there a surety in place to assure the obligation of the developer to return those funds in the event that the developer is unable to do that? That is the function that the surety is providing. Is they're saying, we take on the obligation of the developer to return those funds in the event that they're unable to do so. So in both cases, it's meant to be 100% consumer protective, in the sense that no funds can be withdrawn in excess of what you have deposited. but happy to take questions, that's the idea.
Senator.
Can this, we're talking about a particular project. Could this be done for spec homes? The old model, you put up a model home and I put down a deposit and you build me a home. And then could this same system work there?
So admittedly, I don't know off the top of my, I will just say as a financing mechanism, I see nothing theoretically problematic about that.
Yeah.
But I don't, it doesn't sound as if that would apply, this bill would apply in those instances just because we're talking about common interest communities.
Well,
But if you just think
that's-
theoretically, could you have an alternative financing mechanism that allows the use of deposits to be protected by sureties and allows the funding of construction costs with deposits? Yes, it's a,
I think we should
I
look at common interest communities because I think that is what Senator Cummings. We're starting to see more of those, like,
Well,
you know, they do
yeah,
your
you
plowing and.
Every town has a common interest.
And that's a question whether or not it's worth having a discussion, particularly with the treasurer, for example.
Yeah.
As to whether or not this may be a broader financing mechanism.
Yeah.
That we could use for
Perhaps
housing
for the
in
treasurer.
general.
We are not
Yes.
seeing a whole
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of spec housing going up, haven't since the eighties.
Right,
It's an interesting concept, provided you can.
and I'm not sure exactly how those are sort of funded and managed right now. Snyder is doing, I think, a lot of those in Chittenden County. My parents are looking at one for the fall, but I am curious what financing mechanism they're using. They might just have a lot of additional capital on hand to be building those as they go. But I did appreciate that there was some safety mechanism in place of they do a portion and have no liens and then move on to the next portion. And I don't know if that's just best practice or something we should write in.
It's money.
Well, right, I just don't know if it's something that
Right.
exists in the law
The way
about
that-
clearing liens.
the way I understood the testimony was that that was their practices, so I'm not sure if, but it may be the sense of, and of course they'll be better able to represent on this, but if they have contracts in place that require that, I mean, you could include terms to that effect in your contracts, and so beyond the scope of this, but there are ways to, and that's part of why I tried to narrow the conversation a bit, is just to talk about what this bill achieves. Does sound like there's a set of concerns about broader protections, and just for reference, I did pull up the definition of common interest
Thank
community, which
you.
I talked about, and if there are particular terms you're concerned about in here, and you're saying, what the hell is it, what is a declarant? Happy to pull that up, and this is the Uniform Act, and I can scroll to those as necessary.
I think this is a lot of the housing that's being built right now is common interest community, unless I'm incorrect. And we might want one of our larger developers to come in because they're building a lot of duplex and cottage housing.
But that's
With-
not necessarily a common interest.
But it's saying obligated to pay for a share of maintenance
Yes.
or improvement.
This is every town
This
in
is
Vermont is a common interest.
Well,
No,
right.
no.
We all pay our.
It's not to a
legal
private, but you don't
It's
pay to
your
a private
own
entity.
condominium.
Yeah. Right.
Model.
So
where
this is anywhere with a monthly payment that's ongoing or an annual payment of some sort.
Yeah. And then there's assessments to put new roofs, you can't
Right.
do things on the outside.
Yeah.
But, so all of the apartment buildings that we're building, if
Mhm.
you're paying rent, that's not
Right.
a common interest. I'm think if we're opening this, because it is a way to finance. You used to, people built big tracts of houses and sold them.
Mhm.
They aren't doing that anymore because it's too much of a financial risk. So I think you'll see people putting up a model. And you can go in and say, well, I want this moved and that moved.
Mhm.
I want the pink walls and.
And but
siding.
so that's not a common interest community
No.
unless they are paying an ongoing
Right.
cost
I'm
aside
just
from their
talking
mortgage.
about a traditional housing development where
Mhm.
you buy a house on spec, you say, I want this house here. I can see where it would be helpful financially
Okay.
to allow your deposit to hold your deposit to be used as the construction cost.
So maybe we see how this goes and we look at this tool. I'm not sure if in Canada they were saying they allow this for financing of a neighborhood because no one's paying for
I will
infrastructure of the
find out.
developer anymore.
Actually, I could probably find out right now.
From your
I
side.
think I'm wrong, because, Tom is where he skis.
Okay, but does he pay a monthly?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I mean, no, he drives out there,
Oh, okay.
but
But he lives in
Yeah,
Canada, so
out
he
in
knows
Montreal.
what this is. Yeah.
but his father-in-law is a tax attorney.
Okay, that sounds useful then. I think it might be worthwhile to sort of see how this goes, where we know there's a big project in the works that has a big financer that, has not defaulted, it sounds like anywhere else, and see if this tool adds value for future financing of other projects that aren't common interest. Yeah, Senator.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it will be a valuable tool. And there's just so many different possibilities and different
Yeah.
layers. So I'm very familiar with housing developments that have been done the way Senator Cummings is talking about that are common interest.
Yeah.
Housing developments,
There are.
where you look at a model and decide if you want one, and sometimes you can make changes, sometimes you can't.
Mhm.
And it's definitely more efficient and easier to finance if you can't make changes.
Yeah.
But this would still be the same. But just a couple questions. So the fund shall only be used for actual building and construction costs of the project in which the unit is located. So to me, the project should be this whole Killington Forward. That's the name of the development, right?
That's
So it probably wouldn't be used for water and sewer. You probably, those expenses are gonna have their own funding mechanism, but I think it could.
Right.
Which I'm okay with.
Yeah,
I just wanna bring that up, so it's not as if it would be even necessarily in the same. Like, there will
Right.
likely be pods of
Yes.
development,
a
it
lot
wouldn't
of
be in the same
a
pod.
lot of development absent sort of government saying, we're building water sewer infrastructure, here's where you can develop. A lot of projects have to pay for their own underground infrastructure.
Exactly,
Oh,
right,
So would you say, John, that this covers underground infrastructure?
So, I think that it could, and if you wanted that to be the effect, I think it could be helpful to spell that out, to say actual building and construction costs, including something along those lines, if you want to make sure that you pick them. I think that it should, but I agree that there is ambiguity. This is the first I've heard this question related to what is the scope of actual building and construction costs. If you wanted to spell that out, I think it would be clearer to have and included in, if that's the goal.
I mean, there's a ton of, there's underground,
Infrastructure.
there's also stormwater infrastructure.
I think that it does.
There's a
fit
lot
in.
of things, so I'm not suggesting necessarily that we tighten this up, but I'm just bringing it to our attention. Because the lender would be looking at that too, about what are the logical
Right.
ways to use the money, because
Right.
they wanna make sure their money doesn't get,
Co-mixed.
yes, or spent on something that they don't want it spent on.
Why don't we ask the other regulatory financial bodies coming in about infrastructure? If it,
Sure, yes,
if it's sort of, if they see it as already implicit in there, they welcome it being spelled out or don't welcome it.
right,
Yeah, I think that it does fit this because we're talking about project and building and construction costs,
Mhm,
but
right.
I agree that someone could have a question as to whether it
You
does.
gotta
Right.
have water and sewer before you can build the house and.
right, but you might have another mechanism to finance the water and sewer. And you might wanna keep those separate
I
financially.
think that would be the developers. The developer will determine how he's gonna finance and what he's gonna do. He does that now, even with your money sitting in escrow, that this says with a surety bond, he can use your money to help finance that plan. Usually you have to put in water and sewer and at least take out roads
Right,
before you can build anything.
right. I can see pluses and minuses either way, just depending on who's going to eventually own the water and sewer, because this does get turned over to an entity, and there might be levels of entities. You might have homeowners associations for the pods, and then have a blanket association that's a different level of control. But, so I'm just bringing that up, but regarding the bond, so you said a licensed entity. So does someone
This is
somewhere?
the regulated industry.
Okay, does
I-
that mean that that particular bond is looked at by someone who has the authority to flag if the bond is not proper?
So I will not be a good person to answer this, but I can tell you what I think is probably the right answer. And if you're talking to DFR, that's gonna,
That would-
those
Okay,
folks, and you can also talk to the insurance industry, which can speak to this as well. I'm doubting that some independent entity is looking at that individual bond. That would surprise me. And again, this is me guessing. I doubt that that is the process. It just would be awfully timely. I doubt that that's the way those industries are regulated. It's more that the industry itself would be regulated, that there would be particular restrictions in place as to the kinds of businesses those entities can engage in. Are they limited just to insurance? Like, do they have to meet particular standards in terms of funds that they hold on hand? Things to ask them, for sure, but I'm guessing it's unlikely that the bond is going to anybody other than the surety has it. If the purchaser wants to see it, and then the developers obviously requested and seeing it. So I think those are the parties that are likely seeing it. I know you asked earlier if it was going to some government entity. I don't believe so.
okay.
Certainly, this does
Or-
not
I
independently manage
haven't
that.
seen
case.
bonding being
Or-
advertised online yet.
We might want it to just be in the documents that are filed with the other real estate documents, just with the town clerk. There, I think at some level it should be public.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing is, the last sentence seems to say it has to be either an individual bond or all
All
of the
deposits.
deposits. It seems like you might want a middle ground so that the developer could clump them. Like, we're talking
I
about
agree with that.
pods,
Yeah, you're saying, oh, you could conceivably have.
like 200 now and 200 later, so I don't know if the intent. was
Yeah, the
say that,
intent is.
But you might wanna give them
them
more flexibility.
I think the word all in that clause is what you're
Mhm,
concerned
yes.
about. So I'll think about that. That makes, definitely the intent was not to say only one or literally every.
Yes,
deposit
that
is
doesn't
in.
make sense to me. Okay,
Right.
okay, that's all I have now. But I think it's a great idea and it makes a lot of sense.
Are there other contexts in Vermont that we have surety bond language?
So surety bonds can be all sorts of things, and it's certainly something that's done in sorts of industries. So to explain in particular what is happening under this surety bond to contrast with others, a surety bond is just the assurance that someone's going to perform a particular obligation. You could have a surety bond that's up the form. If you don't develop this project, we're going to do it. You could have something as far that way, to say, our surety, what they do is if the developer fails to construct the building, now we have the obligation to do it. This is limited in the sense, and I would be surprised if there are any sureties that do this sort of thing. This is just about returning funds. But a surety as a concept is a broad concept that's used in all kinds of industries.
It's called performance bonds sometimes.
Exactly.
That's what
It's
I was
just,
gonna ask.
it's just an
Good.
assurance that someone will follow through on an obligation. And it's meant to induce someone to accept a contract that they might not otherwise accept because they're concerned about the reliability of the principal of the contract. That's,
So you'd say I don't know if we haven't needed to have surety bond language in statute.
in other contexts. I would have to do research I'm sure that there are other instances where we talk about surety bonds. And again, as you talk to folks in the industry, they may have a better sense of where those more regularly.
If you just see it elsewhere in this
Sure.
chapter,
Okay,
could you flag that?
yeah, I don't think that within this uniform act it comes up, but I
Okay.
can just scan for
Okay.
that.
This is the uniform common interest.
Community act.
So under uniform commercial code,
Right.
it would be helpful to know if we have other
It
statutes.
was about that thick.
Yes, I know we could always call in Carl Liftman or,
We had lots.
somebody. Yeah.
As the
Yeah.
presenter,
UCC.
it was probably the most difficult bill I've ever had to present.
You did UCC?
Uh-huh.
The first bill I
Well,
ever
actually,
did.
it's a take it or leave it thing, so nobody asks any questions.
Well, it's take it or leave it.
And it came in and David Hall hadn't written it, so he could write me a side by side. So I was kind of on my own.
Yeah.
I clearly should have said, this is a uniform act, you guys just take it or leave it.
That's it.
Well, right, but we
Yeah.
get deep into this. The first bill I ever passed and introduced was exempting security deposits from the uniform commercial code, so someone could get part of their security deposit back for the rent.
That sounds much more complicated than this. I would say.
It was
Yeah.
one line, but it's complicated to
I
change from
think-
uniform commercial.
I
to
think in terms
industrial
of,
estate.
yeah, thinking it through, this is not as hard to think through.
Mhm. And it mirrors the language that others.
Washington, so this match, Washington's, if I can go through and try to call out instances where there is a slight difference.
Mhm.
So if you're looking on the screen, this. I believe Washington has the requirement that the agreement call out that those funds be used for construction costs
Mhm.
and that the surety bond be maintained and obtained by the declarant, but does not have the requirement that the declarant disclose the identity of the issuer of the surety bond to the purchaser. That is unique to us. The other piece that I believe is new here is
So meaning the actual financial entity.
exactly.
That is holding the surety bond out.
Yep.
There.
Why would that be?
Why would we be the ones to include it, or why did they not? Why did
Both.
So this was a request from the committee was concerned just about the purchaser's ability to know exactly what's going on, and they wanted additional information provided, and they thought that having that identity available would allow them to have a person to go to if they found themselves in a dispute.
So
I think that Washington likely didn't include because given that the agreement is already disclosing that it's going to be used for particular construction costs, probably the perception was either this was just not something they were concerned about, or maybe you presume that that declarant is going to be apprised of that throughout the course of the business because they're being told that a surety bond is going to be used for construction costs. Maybe they just think necessarily in the course of that is likely to arise, but there's no danger in having a particular piece.
Yeah, I would think it would make
Yeah.
sense for it to be disclosed,
Yep.
but comfort purchaser, if nothing else.
Exactly. And the one other thing I was going to say is coming down to the bond itself. Theirs, I believe, is restricted to bond being payable upon a final judgment against the declarant requiring the declarant to return the deposit. It did not have the piece related to purchaser obtaining a determination under the terms of the bond from the surety bond issuer. So, but this was something that the committee heard testimony from saying this is the normal course for returning these deposits. And what it does is it is a benefit to the purchaser. This allows them a separate course to go through. So the fact that Washington didn't do this isn't a consumer
Yeah,
protective. thing.
my major concern with this is, as I mentioned before, and DFR may be the entity that could give a better answer to that, is just simply stated, if there's a problem, how long is it gonna take for the purchaser to get the deposit back? And is it possible that it could be tied up in litigation argument for an extended period of time for the detriment of others?
And my,
That's the question.
and my understanding of this particular edition is that you're potentially
Yeah.
dramatically accelerating the process of return. I do have to run, but if you have any last questions?
Okay. Senator Hunt.
It's a great
You
start.
said, purchase and maintain. Are there payments, be set up with, you pay once a year? And if you default, who notifies the,
So as to regularity of payments, I think it is really just deposit being returned under particular conditions. So I'm assuming, unless you're talking about the payment from the developer to the surety.
that's the one.
I think that would be their contract. I can't speak. There's nothing mandated here as to what that would be. I don't know how they set up their industry as far as who would notify a default.
Well, I think that's the EB5 fear here. We set this up, but if you've got a really good crook, it's possible to get those, say, yep, see, I bought the bond. It's like, you're driving your car insurance. I've got it today. The minute I get my
Yep.
thing, I cancel it.
So what I would say is that under this, it is incumbent upon the purchaser to obtain those determination, which to me suggests that the purchaser needs to be making some determination that that is the case. It's not as if there's an independent entity looking to spot them. Now, it may be that best practice or the way that sureties operate is that they do that, but I'm gonna guess, I would guess not. I think this puts the burden on the purchaser to become aware when there's a default. At least that would be my reading. If you're
Okay.
concerned about that, that is something to think about for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will see you guys
Right.
not too long from now. Yes. And if you wanted to touch base on, I can email on kids code and others. So,
Okay, Friday morning.
All right. See you guys.
Okay, so we're moving on to DLL. I think even though part of it was wanting to talk about S18 if it wasn't moving as quickly, it was really helpful to hear Skylar's testimony about the challenges of online enforcement so that we could better understand and appreciate I think the House Commerce Amendment to S18 that gives you another position.
It does, yeah.
Does that position, is it flexible to do tobacco and alcohol?
So Charles Martindale for the record, and yeah, that would be flexible for the intent, the intent behind Chair Markot's edition was that we would look at the office landscape for both tobacco.
Okay. Would it be anything, sports betting, illicit drugs, poison?
I don't know that there would necessarily be, I think Scott and Brandon can speak to that. I don't know if there'd be a conduit to, illicit drugs. There might be another jurisdiction there for some other department. Sports wagering, we have our own kind of way that we're dealing with that from regulatory and enforcement standpoint that I don't think pertains to this amendment
Okay.
either.
Okay. So if you both want to identify yourselves for the record, we also have Lieutenant King.
We do, yeah. Brandon, Lieutenant King's probably gonna just be observing, but he might chime in.
Okay.
So
This
we're
is
focusing on today.
today,
The
now that
minutes.
S18 is kind of out of the way, I think that takes care of any bills that would have originated in the Senate
Mhm.
that relate to DLL. And we're looking at the bills that are coming from the House.
Yeah.
Right. As well as anything else you wanted to talk about. I do know there's one other request coming our way about picking up
Okay.
unused inventory
Yeah, so
that we'd like your thoughts
would it
about.
work if I walk through the miscellaneous bill very quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Give you a flavor for each.
and is the miscellaneous bill where everything lives that
Yeah,
affect you?
so,
Okay,
in terms of legislation affecting us today, that might be relevant. Yeah, we can have the S18 discussion and the miscellaneous discussion, and the rest of the bills don't look like they're, moving anytime soon.
And has the miscellaneous bill passed the House?
Yes,
It has, and what number is it again?
867.
867. Okay, miscellaneous, and it's DL, is it both liquor and lottery miscellaneous? Okay.
and it has cannabis in it too, but we'll have the cannabis control board in, or is that a
That
separate?
came from GovOps and it's going to GovOps, the big cannabis bill,
No
the one that
direct,
Matt Byron.
no direct,
Miscellaneous cannabis should come here,
not our bill, no direct.
Okay.
no
Came from
direct.
GovOps.
but they took some of our jurisdiction. They took vices, which includes cannabis, judiciary gave us cannabis.
They didn't let me tax it.
Hmm?
They didn't let me tax it. I've been looking for new vice for years, cause it's the only thing I can tax.
We will have it in committee, so.
With a smile.
So I'll go
Okay.
through this, as we'll talk S18 and Skylar can talk about at the end. And
Sorry, before you start,
Mhm.
could we get copies of H
Eight.
867 printed out for us by Tony? How long is it, Charles?
It's only, maybe
7
10 pages.
Okay, great.
It's-
If we could get Tony to print out something.
There's an amendment acted on the floors.
Sorry, what number is it?
Is it H 867, I think, right?
That suits you, I can start on sections 1 through 1.
Sounds good. Is that okay with you?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
yeah.
So Representative Dolan had a constitution, section 1 through 4 deal with, a permit type called a special venue serving permit, which is a permit that is open for, it's how you have drinks served to you free of charge at like a museum or a gallery.
Oh, we've
They're
gone
they're
through this
also
before.
extended to bookstores. Representative Dolan came to us before the session, said I have a constituent who has a clothing boutique. Wants to do this type of permit type, which allows you to do free of charge service for up to 6 hours once a day at your business. They can't do this, but the bookstore down the street can. Why is that? And we kind of said, that's a fair question. You should bring that to the legislature. So that's how this was originated.
Yeah.
These first 4 sections would expand eligibility for that permit type to all retail establishments other than those that serve, already are serving alcohol. It limits those permits which currently have no cap on the amount you can draw a year to 12 annually. The intent behind that was to ensure if there's a much larger take up across the state, the actual overall volume of permits doesn't become, out of hand, because if we're expanding it beyond these three type of humanities to everybody. That could potentially be a lot of take up. And it also inputs a 2-year sunset on it, so that we can look at this and come back to the legislature and say, there is or there is not, a public safety trend that emerged because of this change. We're okay with this, the department didn't object to it, so.
Well, we've been down this road so often.
Yeah, it's an interesting permit type. It was a fair question though on the bookstore lens, why it's not looking to that. So we move on from there if there are no questions. Section 5 allows sampling event permit holder to purchase invoice volumes of alcoholic beverage from wholesale dealers. This is something that actually, I believe this committee supported last year, but it went back to the House and the House.
And died.
Yeah, the House took a lot of stuff out of the bill, so we were supportive of it then, we're still supportive of it, and the House agreed to it this year.
And sorry, remind me,
Say that again.
what it
It's
involves.
a sampling event permit, and it would
Oh.
allow, a sampling event permit holder to purchase invoice volumes of alcoholic beverage from wholesale dealers.
So that would be like a winery
Skylar's,
or.
I'll let Skylar.
Remind us who's included in this
No,
group.
I thought it was a restaurant staff and come in and do a testing of different wines.
I think Skylar can speak to the folks who.
There are a bunch of
Yeah.
different.
Instead of us guessing, because there were a lot of
Yeah.
categories last year.
Sure. For the record, Skylar Janess, I'm the Senior Director of Licensee Operations for the Vermont Department of Liquor and Lottery. The sampling event permit is probably best formally known as the festival permit. These
Yeah.
function in form and function like a brew fest or a wine fest. There was a change to undo maybe an unintended consequence of the move from a festival permit to the sampling event permit here. The wholesale dealer tier was excluded as a source of beverage alcohol for these events. So the sampling event permit certainly allows for the brew fest to occur or the wine fest to occur, but it carved out the wholesale dealers, meaning that the event holders had to source the beverage alcohol from either the manufacturer, directly from the manufacturer, either in state or out of state. And both the wholesale tier and the manufacturer tier had both expressed to us that that was really not as how they would have desired it to come to fruition. They wanted the wholesale tier included as well. So we saw no objection and support the wholesale tier being a source of beverage alcohol for these permanent events.
Section 6 would increase the limit on special event permits that may be acquired by an individual licensee from 10 to 20. I recall again that this was something that was supported by this committee last year. Died in the House. The House initiated it this year. Over. Section 7 is pretty technical in nature. It amends the due date for our state lottery report from January 10 to March 10. The intent is we can provide more accurate numbers and delve less into estimates if we have this extension. That was our finance department related to me.
Well, especially given how many big things happened in January.
Correct. Section 8 extends the effective date required for liquor liability insurance from July 1, 2024 to July 1, 2026. So you might recall last year there was a bill, I think page 288 in the House that, or Act 17, that as a condition input a new requirement that as a standard condition of licensure, all licensees need to carry some sort of liquor liability insurance as determined by a schedule that would be developed by DFR and DLL. And the schedule, for a little background, would just, if you're a mimosa brunch place on a Sunday, you have a different insurance requirement than a nightclub, for instance. We're hearing from insurers and just the industry in general that there's still a lot of difficulty in acquiring liquor liability insurance that's even affordable for some people. And that kind of widespread is the feeling of BTIR as well. You can speak with Andy Swear if you want their input on that. So this amendment is intended to move that due date out by 2 years to allow the market to improve a little bit more before we put this Band-Aid down. That might be impossible for a lot of licensees at this point.
Do we have reason to think it's going to improve?
Yes, 'cause it's
Yeah.
already approved. It's already approved
Okay.
a little bit. So,
Because that's the key is
Yeah.
why extend it if it's not improving?
yeah.
Well, that's,
So there's,
Yeah.
there's been some, from what I understand, I'm not an insurance expert, I'm not, BTR, so if anybody to have that minute if you want to hear more about it, but it has
I
gone.
think that would be good because it's not just cost, it's speed of getting it. It's a combination of the two.
From recalling testimony in House Judiciary last year, it's just very difficult to acquire it, and yeah, it's cumbersome to find someone who will offer it, and it's not a quick one and done, Google search it. Find
So
it quick.
who's required to have liquor? I mean, I can't remember who we asked in
So-
this.
Was it Dram?
A landlord might require it as a condition of the lease if you have a space that you're leasing, and I believe, Skylar can speak to this, if you're someone who's had a violation type, Skylar, that will require it.
You mean like a bar or restaurant or a,
If you have a historical violation, Skylar can speak to the specifics of that.
Okay.
That would require it in those instances.
but normally bars and restaurants don't carry this?
They do carry, most of them do. It's the exception that the people who don't, but they usually have a pretty good reason. That's, there's difficulties.
So if most bars and restaurants, and we have a lot of them, carry this, why is it so difficult? I mean,
I would really just encourage VTR to come in.
Yeah.
I know that Vermont is one of the hardest jurisdictions or states in the country to find this type of insurance. I know that's a factual
Yeah.
statement I recall from last year.
Yes,
okay, so this moves the due date out 2 years because of all these.
Difficulties.
we could speculate, but there are a lot of major insurance companies in the world that are dropping liability coverage for a lot of our industries in Vermont because they're small and they don't, it's less costly for them to just not comply with the different states' regulations if we're a small book of business.
Yeah, but small, either small or actually so many claims. It would be interesting to see what it is.
I think we should ask DFR, but
Yeah.
when we had this issue last year,
Yeah.
that's who
They have
was
it.
involved.
Yeah.
I don't think the cost went down significantly. We hoped that changing our laws so they're more streamlined with the region at least would bring the cost of liquor liability insurance down,
Mhm.
and that didn't necessarily happen.
That was the feedback we've received from some industry, and some insurers.
Yeah.
So we're just taking their kind of word for it. We
Right.
haven't done a lot of insurance
Do
marketing.
you know the average cost now for them or?
Great DFR.
Okay.
Question.
We'll get more.
I don't have that top of mind.
Will you make a note that the apartment? This,
Yeah, DFR and CTIR, Vermont Insurance.
Vermont Independent Restaurants, that's like the
Okay,
organization that works, with the chambers and others.
okay, and that they would be good to get to. Right.
So I'm gonna quickly,
can you say them again? Is it the Vermont restaurant?
Vermont.
Vermont Independent
Yeah,
Restaurant
Mini Spirit, Vermont.
Baby Spirit,
yeah.
Okay, great.
and DFR.
So I'm gonna just go to the last two sections because they're very quick and easy.
Section number.
Well, I shouldn't say that actually.
Mhm.
You know what, we'll just go in order, because I can see section 11 quoting some conversation. So section 9 and 10, we had a request from Chair Marcotte on behalf of a constituent, who was looking to have licensed entities, that have merged, be able to form a parent corporation, and operate their unified payroll and administrative system. I think the language in the bill, our primary concern was just that we were able to identify liability and accountability if something bad happens. And Skylar can speak to details there, but I think we're satisfied there, but I think Skylar wanted to bring some things to the committee's attention in terms of the fee that was included for the licensing for this new licensing type. I think it might be a little bit low to
Yeah.
cover the cost, so.
Well, and it seems low if you were some kind of, you have a
Wow.
retail master license for,
Yes,
I don't know if there's tiers, I don't know, I don't wanna
This is-
complicate
This
it,
is
but
a new license,
it will
right?
be a new license.
This is a new
what's
license.
the individual license?
Fee.
I'm gonna let Skylar give you jump in here. 'Cause it's-
Yes, and then this would go to finance.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of
Yeah.
fees.
Skylar, were you gonna,
Yeah, happy to speak to it a little bit. I guess let me kind of let you understand our current licensing paradigm in the state. and kind of lay that out so you can see how this business proposal that
Charts. Should be one of our big charts here because we all forget every year. It's
sure.
pathetic. We're hopeless.
That's okay. It can be convoluted for sure. Historically, in the state within Title VII in the board's rules, our licensing paradigm has always been a one-to-one relationship, one license relative to one business entity. Now, that business entity could have a number of individuals that are directors, partners, managers within the corporate structure. But historically, it's always been we issue one license to one entity as defined, by either a corporation, a sole proprietorship, a partnership, if you will. What the department was approached with was a business scenario where a number of corporations who held individual licenses, so we'll say Corporation 1 and Corporation 2, had individual licenses issued to them. They were acquired by a parent company. Both of those corporate entities were acquired, and the holding company, for lack of a better term, was not interested in transferring the licenses up one level in the corporate structure to a holding company as we know it, a company that actually holds the licenses. They wanted to maintain licensure at the lower level of the subsidiary companies. The reasons why they wanted to do that were a couple, but primarily one of the complications that came from it was what they wanted was a unified payroll system that would allow all of their employees to be paid by the holding company, yet work on behalf of the individual licenses that are held by the subsidiaries. This ran afoul of a couple of parts of Title VII law and regulation because historically we've always expected any work performed at a licensed premise is conducted by the licensee. We wanted to see that the activities involved with sale and service of beverage alcohol or regulated products are in fact carried out by employees of the licensee. So we let them know that this was a challenge. We let them know some other pathways forward. There are many unified payroll systems that can allow multiple entities to have multiple payrolls within a unified system. But what we let them know was what they were proposing to the department ran afoul of a number and generally a woven thread throughout Title VII around our licensing structure. So here we have this proposed special license, a retail master license which meets this explained circumstance where there's a parent company that owns subsidiary companies who will hold licenses issued by the department. What it would allow for, as stated in the proposed legislation, would allow for a unified payroll system, and it would funnel all liability from the subsidiary companies up to the holder of the retail master license. The department did ask for that clear chain of liability, which is now included in the legislation you see before you. But the one thing that I did want to talk about is the fee. So it's set at $1,000 currently as proposed. The department does not believe that fee adequately addresses the cost for the licensure of this sort of business arrangement. For one, the department would have to do some significant infrastructure work to upgrade our entire data model within our licensing system to accommodate not a one-to-one relationship of a license to an entity, but a one-to-many relationship of one license to many entities. And with that sort of infrastructure change comes some significant cost. Additionally, this $1,000 fee, we believe, was somehow modeled after our resort master license fee, which is the only other master license you will find in Title VII, and it's set at $1,000. But again, even the resort master license fee is talking about one license issued to one resort, and it allows them to do some additional things on their licensed premises.
So and that's, I imagine, contiguous. It's only for contiguous
Yes.
property.
Correct.
That
We
is
discussed this. It'll spark some memory of, because we discussed this. But
Yeah,
there would come exception for golf courses, like they're not all contiguous. Anyway, I remember discussions about this, if the resort, the main buildings are here, or the golf place is here, the ski area is there, they're still all under that master resort license, I think.
That is correct, and that does allow them to serve alcohol on that less than contiguous property. Right, correct.
Yeah.
We have a number of master resort licenses in play. There are some requirements that they must meet to qualify, and it has functioned quite well. Again, it's very different than what this license is looking to do. And the department believes that the $1,000 fee would be inadequate to address the actual cost of licensure for this license.
You have a proposal? I mean, I would imagine that at least for some period of time, you'd have to still look individually at each subsidiary and could probably pull that into a master license, but either you need a period of time to do that or a tier system. So if you have 2 locations versus 10 locations or entities,
Yeah.
different. I would imagine also dealers and manufacturers are really different. I don't know, like this seems like if you all want to do work to make this work, we will in the meantime talk to Chair Marcotte about understanding the problem he wants to solve. But if it's a financial problem he's trying to solve, we might not be able to help him, because I agree that you have just as much work to do, especially because all these entities still have to be following your regulations. It's not like you can look at one set of books in Montpelier and feel comfortable with everything that's going on everywhere else in the state.
Yeah, I was great minds are clearly thinking, like I was thinking, wow, it sounds like this would be very good to have a tier system here. And if you guys came back to us with a proposal, I think it would be interesting to entertain. So I mean, hoping how many that had 1 to 4 and then or 5 to 10 or whatever.
But you kind of know what you do,
You know what
so
yeah.
like I wouldn't move forward with this section personally. Others could disagree. Unless you felt you had a path to be adequately funded and still provide the same level of oversight of every single entity. I don't know what it looks like to look at the book somewhere. Is this like Baker Distributing, or is this like, who are our dealers and manufacturers that would fall under this?
Right. I think that's
So retail dealers, so this is you have multiple store locations.
Yeah, and so without naming specific the specific companies involved here, what we are talking about is the merging of 2 significant beverage alcohol manufacturers who have contiguous to their manufacturing property. They also have retail licenses. So a number of licenses held by this entity that manufactures and sells beverage alcohol, combined with another entity that manufactures and sells, and all a subsidiary of a parent company. So it does get complex, and the department, again, this is very new. The department really is yet to fully explore what all of the challenges and costs around this would look like, simply because it's never been allowable nor entertained by the department and in our licensing schema lasting since 1933.
It also says the holder of a retail master license may provide unified payroll and administrative services. So it sounds like it's up to them, and if they don't, you're still doing the same amount of work. And I imagine administrative and payroll isn't even your major focus with licensing. That's like secondary to following regulations appropriately.
Correct. And
Correct.
And let me be clear, we would have already engaged in the licensing process for the subsidiary companies, right? These licenses do exist. This simply kind of creates a bespoke license that channels all liability upward toward the master resort license. And then 2 says, regardless of whether they're working at license A, B, or C, they're employees of the retail master license, and then they can work on a unified payroll being paid by the holding company and work at any one of these licenses at any given time, which would be prohibited by both state law and regulation, meaning that all activity conducted on the licensed premises has to be conducted by the holder of the license. And this elevates one level of licensure above, the licenses that the subsidiary companies already hold, and say, well, they are employees of the master license, which are then subsidiaries, and they can work at any one of those. Now, we have offered paths forward, and this is not this sort of corporate structure is not a unique arrangement by any stretch of the means within the state. Most of our large chain organizations have a holding company which holds the license and allows them, then regardless of what location they're working, they're employees of the licensed entity. And
Applebee's or any chain restaurant that serves alcohol is one of those.
Well, I would, to put dealers and manufacturers on the same license, do you have a concern about that? Because I just see those as two different functions and kind of, I don't know about, like, I don't know how much you'd wanna say wherever you have, you know, where you're manufacturing and you're selling product and all of this, that can be one license. That just strikes me as not the way our current alcohol regime operates.
it certainly is a stark departure from that, yes.
It is a dark departure, that's it. Yeah,
Okay, well, this has been flagged.
Yep.
and it
Do
doesn't,
you want to work on something, or do you wanna wait to hear if we feel like we want to honor Chair Marcotte's intent of some sort?
Yeah, you might just chat with
Yeah,
Chair Marcotte and
okay.
see what.
we will
I think
do
we're
that.
meeting with him today.
We are speaking shortly.
We'll add this to the top of our agenda. And then we'll let you know if, yes, we wanna help work on some language. But we understand that for you, you'd wanna fit it into your existing oversight and licensing process and recoup the dollars you need to do almost the same amount of work in alcohol.
Yeah, now this is, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so back to
So 11 came up, there's a group of legislators in the House who were interested in where alcohol products are placed at retail establishments, like physically placed, like are they near the register, are they sharing coolers with non-alcohol
Mhm.
products? It came up in relation to canned cocktails because some of them look very similar by some estimations to non-alcoholic beverages.
Yeah.
some of us have raised those issues for quite a while,
Yes,
which
not a new.
this is not new.
Yeah, no, alcoholic seltzers look like regular seltzers to us.
It's one of the concerns some of us have as we moved in this direction and selling them in.
And are there, like, I know that kombucha has to say this has trace amounts of alcohol in it.
I think the alcohol content is displayed right now.
Okay, like, are there alcoholic kombuchas that are at like 5% ABV? Do they do like alcohol?
Skylar's nodding his head. yes.
Okay, yeah, I think it's confusing for people.
There was originally an effort to just compel or add to the bill language that said, you know, shall not have alcoholic products in proximity or commingling to
Mhm.
non-alcoholic products. That's kind of vague, that's hard to enforce, if
Yeah.
those aren't statutorily defined terms, so like,
Okay.
how do you determine that? So on its face, it was a difficult one to achieve, but also there wasn't a whole lot of time to actually hear from grocers or hear from people who lay their stores out. And to give some background, we do every so often, I think the last one was 2022, a tobacco retail audit, where we go to tobacco retailers and look at a number of things our investigators do. One of those is alcohol placement, that's a component of it. So we have some data on this, that data demonstrated that only about 10% of licensees were actually commingling products or putting them in proximity, close
Mhm.
proximity to other products. And that was usually a product of their space, their actual physical layout is being small, right? They share coolers because they may only have one cooler in the retail establishment. So it was a kind of a minority of licensees who were doing this.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of shopping and I'm sorry, ginger ale is right there and all the other things are right there along with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like
it's
alcohol
totally
on
commingled.
In some sorts it is, in some sorts it's not,
Yeah,
I would say.
And the wine, you're right, in the grocery stores, our wine sections do tend to be separate from, but not separate from beer. So beer and non-alcoholic stuff is sold all the time in the same aisle,
In the same, definitely the same.
but not
aisle.
wine. Wine and champagne and stuff tends to be in a separate.
And Scott can probably jump in on the specifics of what they're looking at, but I think they were specifically looking for like. Do you actually, like in the same rack, a distribution rack, is there a spike Sunny D next to a Sunny D?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
versus like
It's spicy.
a new cooler here
I
and
don't know what that is, but I'm sure.
and you know, non-alcoholic cooler here and an alcoholic cooler here.
Yeah.
Here, yeah.
Okay,
So rather than inputting this amendment that would kind of prohibit that commingling without really understanding what that means or what the landscape looks like. This would compel us to come back and report to you and others, on what the landscape looks like after we do this audit again this summer.
Okay,
It'll give us a little bit more information to kind of review the whole licensee community on this topic.
Mhm.
And hopefully provide greater opportunity for the industry to have some input because their voice should definitely be heard on this.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do a statewide impact.
I just have some questions on the language here. Should it be now called the like tobacco and alcohol?
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Retail
really,
audit?
It's a audit that we do in partnership with VDH, and I think Sam Skylar can jump in here, guides what the audit is called. That
Okay.
book is the tobacco, because we're doing tobacco compliance, you know, I believe.
Don't we guide what the audit should be called?
You can do whatever you.
Okay. That sounds good to me then.
The reason they're in the source is the fact that they're tobacco licensing, such
Yeah.
that's why the term tobacco is.
But you're also auditing places that are alcohol licensed,
Which is almost always the case.
always the same.
Tobacco,
Okay.
tobacco, if you hold a tobacco license, I think almost universally the case, if you hold tobacco
Okay.
alcohol license also.
but I think it's time for us to shake up this stuff and include the other key thing that we're working on.
And then I've never seen us, maybe this is I'll go back to who drafted this?
It's usually Tucker or,
It was Tucker, but I think he went out on,
Right, yeah,
He didn't
okay,
say
otherwise
he
he's
is.
in here, yes, he's out on maternity.
I wanna say that
little
Tucker,
Henrik was born.
this was after Tucker left for leave. So
Okay.
Damien might have,
Okay, so we'll
then
figure it
Brandon
out,
drafted
but
it.
I've just never seen us say that we're requiring the report to take the form of a presentation to each committee.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
that
recall.
was, I don't remember which legislator, but someone had that preference. They didn't want us to just issue the report. They wanted the context, which we always provide anyway.
Right, but
But
I actually think that ties the hands of a future legislature and other committees that you don't have jurisdiction over, so I think we just take that out, just like that, it's, if you don't.
I have no,
And also
Here.
it's incumbent on the chair to make sure that it's
Exactly,
presented.
yeah, I don't,
certainly.
if a committee gets really busy with other things and they trust their partner committee, they shouldn't have to make a presentation on this, so. We just don't usually do that, and I don't wanna set that precedent.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
And then section 12 is just the mechanics for the,
Mhm.
set,
Yeah,
the earlier section.
great. And you have no issue with the effective dates? Okay, we have 10 minutes for questions.
Just a super quick question about, if we make changes to, tobacco, would that be included automatically in this audit, with the flavored
Yeah.
tobacco? Is that something that would be
Yeah,
included?
one assumes it's.
I don't know if it would change in real time. You can speak to Skylar on how the factors of what's included in the audit evolves, but I don't know that it would change in real time. It's a
With
question for the investigators.
the audit as it stands now already asks questions about if the retailer sells flavored products. Obviously, we would continue to collect that data. The only difference would be after S18, potentially when the question is asked, it could be a criminal violation, relative other than just data collection. So we will be collecting data elements relative to types of products sold, manner in which the products are sold for tobacco, certainly.
So should we, if we don't have an ongoing report for this, should we be putting the online sales findings in this report as well?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to speak for, so we help facilitate this report with VDH. This is very much a partnership. I don't want to speak, I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of VDH. The department feels strongly in reporting all of the data we collect. And that certainly includes our online sales compliance activity. I would be hesitant to speak on behalf of VDH to include that in their report.
What's interesting is this section also says DLL shall report. So you're here reporting to us. Does that make, is this your report in essence, or?
So
Is that
I
confusing?
spoke with the Department of Health on that, and they were fine with us reporting results because they can do the deep interpretation of the long-term
Mhm.
health consequences on the results, but we can speak to the actual here's what stores physically look like as of this time.
Yeah,
You know, and I
right.
think, so they were okay with, they encouraged us to report it essentially, which I think is acceptable.
So I will reach out to them, but with the intent of saying, I would like online sales to be reported in the same report.
Is that, so Skylar does a lot of that, remember from our last test?
And someone new is gonna be doing it.
So is that, Skylar, is that feasible to combine those tasks?
Well, I combine the reporting, I think is completely feasible. They are a bit separate tasks, right?
No, I meant not the reporting. The reporting I would assume was easier to combine. I meant the tasks themselves.
The retail audit involves visiting brick and mortar stores, whereas obviously online sales is a little bit different. It's visiting websites and attempting purchases. You may remember the report we recently published relative to direct-to-consumer shipping sales. If the committee's requesting a very similar report for the department's activities relative to direct-to-consumer tobacco sales, I think the department could certainly could easily accommodate that request and provide a similar report.
I think if we're creating a position and if we are, worried about online sales enforcement, especially as we tighten up other markets, I think we should have a place where that gets reported every year routinely. So
if I
I
may,
would like to.
might I draw the committee's attention to an already statutorily compelled tobacco compliance report? You'd find that in Title 7, 10.0, it's either 5 or 10.07. I'm just looking quickly. So we are already required, it is 10.07. We are required to furnish a report relative to tobacco compliance. I think we could simply include any online compliance in that report and compel that report to the committees of jurisdiction.
Do you have strong feelings about those remaining separate reports? I don't understand why we could just look at retail placement as a separate report from overall compliance in the future.
We rely on partnerships with VDH to complete those retail audit report. So it's not just liquor investigators collecting that data. It's a partnership with community coalitions. So tying our online compliance reporting to that retail audit reporting, I think that they're very separate efforts with very separate stakeholders. I think the report under Title 7, 10.07, subsection 3 is a wholly DLL report where we're required to report on tobacco compliance statewide. And I would simply make a suggestion to the committee that it may better fit to compel an online tobacco compliance report in that same section.
Do you do alcohol compliance in that same report, or that's a separate report that you send us?
We do not. There is no statutory compulsion for an alcohol compliance report. Alcohol compliance is also not statutorily compelled by the department. The department believes in it. The department allocates resources to engage in alcohol compliance as best we can. But Title VII compels us to conduct tobacco compliance at every licensed tobacco establishment. And further, under S18, as passed, would compel the department to engage in continued work with the AG's office for online tobacco compliance and enforcement. But there is no part of section of Title VII which compels us to engage in alcohol compliance at our licensed alcohol establishments.
It strikes me, given your testimony previously, that it would make sense to do both. Online, for the online piece, given your testimony about how many people under 18 accepted stuff and.
So, well, we're at 10:56 and I'd like to give people a short 5-10 minute break. So if Tucker gets back in time to give this a good look.
He won't be, I don't.
We will do that. If not, I don't think I'm gonna add something complicated to some other board-ledge council person's like
Damien, who has before Tucker does it pretty cool.
But he has a lot going on, so maybe we'll just, this is like a amusing of things, but I think number 3 has to be taken out on the presentation to each committee. But everything else, let's see if we can kind of like make sense of what we ask for and how it relates to the titles of what we say we're asking for in the sections of statute. I just want to open it back up for any other questions that people have in the last 3 minutes.
Thank you. Just one quick question on the retail master license. It sounded as if you might have an idea of what an appropriate fee would be. And we cut you off, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think we talked.
Happy to, I don't know if I have an exact, I've asked for statements of work from our technology vendors for what creating this license would look like. I've yet to get results from that back. Additionally, because this is so new, we don't quite, it's hard for us to understand the entirety of the scope of work involved, but we know that it is at least double of what our licensing activities would be, being that it's at least 2 entities coming together under one parent corporation. So, we do believe that the $1,000 for a master resort license is it's just not likely an adequate estimation of what the costs would be for this license.
Well, I think we've asked you to look at a possible tier system for that.
But
and
we,
come back
well,
to us.
first we said we talked to Chair Marcotte today,
And we'll do that.
and before we make you do any other.
Right. And can I just
Yeah.
follow up question, if you don't mind? How does the $1,000 compare to what the sub entities are already paying in fees?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I knew, like, what is a license now cost?
Well, it depends on the type. Each of our licenses have different types pursuant to what they're pursuing. So I know the proposed legislation talks about a retail dealer and a manufacturer license. So just for clarification, I'll give costs for each, and fees is under 204. A manufacturer's license is $285 for Vinous malt and spirits. A retail license, and that gets a bit nuanced because it's either on-premise or off-premise. On-premise is generally our first-class license. That's $230. And then, for our what is our second-class license, which is an off-premise license, that's $140.
Okay. It is 11 o'clock, and this has been extremely helpful. Is there any final words you wanted to say, or we'll just see you back when we have some thoughts on changes?
Yeah, happy to come back. I don't have any.
With DLL, there are no final thoughts because it's an annual event.
Annual.
And I want to make sure you did get the opportunity to say last time that sports betting revenues are higher than
Yes.
were anticipated. I remember that, so we just appreciate that. People are asking us in the building, how is that going? Where's the money going? So it is helping our general
General
fund.
Fair
already.
statement is made.
Substantial portion of that is coming from out-of-state revenues.
Yeah, 53%.
So that earlier estimate
Oh,
was
yeah.
an error.
Oh, okay.
Operators is 40%.
Okay,
it's
that's
still
still
very
pretty
robust.
good, yeah,
But yeah, we're really happy to see that number.
yeah.
It's another report though.
Yeah, we're posting, and I'll share it with the committee, monthly now, revenue reports and special event reports that will reflect revenues gained from like the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
And those,
yeah.
and then just monthly revenues.
That is a good point, though. You have been very good about sending reports to us, and we try to honor that by having you in here to talk about all of them. If you have thoughts offline about reports you don't feel are getting, adequately seen or addressed, we are very open in this committee to consolidating reports or stopping asking for something we're not using, and that's a goal of the legislature overall, so.
How do you make better reports that are shorter, more to the point?
And you'd be
accurate
great.
and read?
Yeah,
It's really important.
Right.
It's really.
sports
that's
betting
really
was, those 4 bullet points are more used, I sent those to the rest of the Senate, I believe, and
Yeah.
people found that really helpful after having voted for it. You're not gonna read a 15-page report, so if we can take anything off your plate,
Okay.
we are happy to do that.
Let me bring that back to the commissioner, and I will be prepared to see what we might suggest.
But a simple thing for us to happily report is that we're double where we expected to be year to date.
Yeah, that's also.
That's pretty great.
Well, that was before the Super Bowl, so I don't know, is that the?
That was after. That was after.
I'll probably hesitate to
Yeah,
share exact revenue
Exact
numbers. I
right.
can share reports with exact numbers on it. I'm consulting.
great, a short email.
Okay.
But certainly the theme that we're doing much better than anticipated is an accurate.
Okay, thank you all. We'll go offline and come back at 11:10. We'll have the